All right, hello friends. So we are back to, what is it, the fourth iteration, I think, on this connection abstraction stuff. Corey, do you want to summarize where we were last time? Because I also don't remember, honestly.
Last time we finished off, we had finished reviewing all of the sort of core abstractions, and we were moving on to the HTTP client and other ancillary APIs that were added for this.
The HTTP client.
So if we want to start off here, we can look at the connection.FromPipe method, which is on your screen right now.
Oh, sorry, is it? Okay.
Yep, right in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
So I realized while implementing this that iDuplex pipe does not have any concept of like releasing resources. So we need, if you're creating something from a pipe, we also need a way for someone to release resources. So I added overloads here of taking disposables. I don't love it, but I'm not really sure what else to do here for that.
I don't understand. So just like Grotless, would you pass in the pipe reader and pipe writer itself? You complete those individually, not the overall duplex pipe.
I'm trying to grok what you would pass in a disposable. Like what
Can I take this one?
would you release? Yeah.
Okay, so Corey mentioned this to me yesterday. So like in Kestrel, we wouldn't use this because the transports get shut down with the server.
Right.
But imagine that the connection was like the only owner of a socket. There's, without using like a deprecated like on reader, on writer completed kind of stuff, there's no way to know that like the socket is fully closed by just closing the pipes. So if you want to use the iConnection or the connection, as an abstraction to represent like the lifetime of the socket and so forth, and then you back it by a pipe, it becomes weird.
So maybe we shouldn't have these overloads?
Yeah, I mean, if I know that implementing pipe tends to involve a little more complexity, so maybe having these helper methods from pipe, just maybe they're not necessary, maybe they don't save enough.
I mean, I think it just means that the caller has to somehow
implement all of it.
Their own association of what the disposed semantics are for the pipe that they passed in.
Right.
Do we have a leave open on the from stream?
I would just delete
those overloads.
So is the stream one always disposing?
It's always disposing. We could add a dispose parameter if we want.
A beautiful leave open parameter that we have everywhere else.
Yeah.
Right. So David,
As
far as the overloads you want to delete, is it all the FromPipe overloads or just the ones that take iDisposable?
Disposable ones.
Yeah,
and I think if you wanted to do that, you would implement the connection yourself, right? Just don't have a convenient wrapper over it.
So what is the usability here? Like, I know Kestrel is doing something special, but from anyone else's perspective, if they are using connection as kind of the owner of the resource and they just want to dispose the connection and have that clean everything up for them, like it seems like they would never use this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
so are we adding this only for Kestrel? Like, who's going to actually use it? Because I don't think Kestrel's going to use it, right?
Adding what?
The FromPipe.
Which one?
Well, the one without the disposable. So these are really intended to be convenient things if you don't want to implement the entire connection and you're calling like .filter and you just want to say return this new connection and here's the new connection that's just a stream. I didn't care about all the connection stuff.
So Stefan, remind me, so this is the equivalent of us trying to do an SSL thing ourselves where we have to wrap a stream and then wrap that in a connection?
So you're saying like in SSL like connection middleware, would we use FromPipe? Is that the question?
We don't have to, but if there wasn't one built in, we would use from stream or from pipe, right? To take a stream, to take the current stream, wrap it, get a new stream back, and then wrap that in a connection in a convenient way.
Right.
That's
Well,
what
because we use SSL stream, we would use from stream. But assuming we had like SSL pipe or something,
right.
Then we could probably use that. But it would, again, it works in Kestrel because Kestrel's special. Like I do kind of agree with Corey here.
And this is about trying to observe, just like Rock again. This is about trying to observe when someone called dispose from the outside.
Well, this is as if the connection owned the socket.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I see.
Yeah, do you have a
hold on.
sample code?
Yeah, I gotta save me some sample code.
Like, I just want to see how you think someone's going to be calling this. Like, when are you going to call the from stream? What are your using scopes? What are your lexical scopes? Like, what state is going on here? Is the connection supposed to be the whole state, or is it part of some other state?
So in Kestrel, if you wanted to observe the completion of a socket, you could using the connection close token, but it just doesn't kind of integrate with dispose the way it would probably on a client that owned the socket or something.
So I just put in chat a quick thing of how someone would use this. It's really intended only to be convenience. It's probably not something that we would ever use in a concrete implementation because it can be done a little more efficiently if we don't use this.
Right, but then what are they doing with that connection? Are they expected to be returning it, or is it like going to go to a field, or what?
So middleware. Sorry.
Well,
okay, middleware.
The whole concept of this is layering things on top of each other. So here we have like an initial connection. We're just saying layer on this filter on top of that. So that C variable is where it goes.
So that seems fine. I'm wondering about the overload that takes the disposable. Like, what would that look like? I still have it in my brain.
It's really
pipe,
just
pipe.
You'd pass the pipe that does all the reading and writing, and then you'd have a disposable for the actual resource that the pipe is reading and writing to, so that when you call connection.dispose, it cleans everything up.
Still don't see it. My brain is still not working.
So
it feels like you could just do, unless the pipes themselves are never disposable and that something else manages their lifetime, but it feels like you could do pipe as iDisposable, and if it's iDisposable, then you dispose it. But now we're back to you want the Booleans, because every time we ever do we assume we're taking ownership, someone somewhere wants us not to. So, but if the expected call for the two that take a disposable is you pass the same value in the first two parameters, then that seems like we should just do a runtime as check.
I don't know if we can expect that, but I haven't used pipelines enough to know if that's a common pattern.
It's not super common to have like a disposable resource implement like iDuplex pipe. I don't think I've seen that. So
the
David,
disposable resource produces a pipe on top of itself that can lose state arbitrarily?
Well, lose state arbitrarily, I don't know if I understand what you mean by that.
That you have the pipe that's backed by a disposable thing, but the pipe doesn't know it's backed by a disposable thing, and it could get disposed out from under it.
Well, you're supposed to be responsible, but yes, yeah.
Right. Well, because it seems like the same thing would apply here to the connection. That if pipes in general are someone's managing the ownership of the pipe, then I don't know why the connection would start wanting to manage the ownership of the pipe.
Right. In Kestrel, it's interesting.
Well, in this case, the idea is that the connection is the resource, and you call like connection.pipe to get access to the pipe for the connection. So it's trying to make this easy convenience method that somehow implements that expected behavior.
Why can't the connection call pipe.reader.complete?
Oh no, it does. But
dispose is for
talking
what?
with Stefan, calling complete doesn't necessarily dispose of the actual resource that the pipe is using.
But there's no way to know that, right? I mean, so like,
that's the problem.
I don't think this makes sense though, right? It's kind of arbitrary. I think a cast is much better.
So iDisposable, just in case.
Yeah, because it seems arbitrary that like you're passing this extra argument just in case the thing has a resource that is tied to it.
Before we do the iDisposable cast, there should be like an actual iDuplex pipe that's disposable in practice anywhere, which I don't think is true.
The issue is like it's the same thing we spoke about a long time ago. Like interfaces being disposable, it's kind of a hack, right?
Like
it's
you're saying
as good
that
as an ASCAST.
It's like the interface. Wait, yeah. I mean, what's as good as an ASCAST?
The interface itself being disposable, trying to basically assume that every single implementation has to be disposable. It's like stream. You do it because some are, not because most are, right? Like memory stream dispose is a no-op, but it happens to be there because it's convenient for direct classes to maybe be disposable.
Well, at least iDuplex type is an interface and not like an abstract base class. So it's certainly something that you could do if you cared.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, so if we're going to change this, go ahead.
If we think if it's wishy-washy the ownership of the resource when it comes to pipes, does it make sense to have a FromPipe at all?
Having FromPipe is fine. Having the ones that take disposable as a parameter is not fine.
Okay, because it would not be obvious at all to me that it would try to cast it to a disposable if I was using this API.
No, it wouldn't be, and it doesn't have to be.
And I don't even know if that's something the user might want.
Yeah, and I don't want to
it happens by accident.
Either. Right.
Leave open is required because there's no concept of ownership in .NET, so you have to have leave open regardless. Right.
I mean, we have it for stream too, but
like for stream, you have the same problem. That is kind of decoupled from like who calls dispose isn't the same thing as well.
I agree. It's not unique to pipe. It's the same issue for pipe and stream. If we do the iDuplex pipe might be disposable thing.
Yeah, I mean the reason I left off a leave open here is that the connection should be the owner of the resource. That's kind of its role. So
then why can't the connection just call complete and call that a day?
It does.
Then why do we need disposable? I'm super confused.
Okay, so
just because there's the other, I guess there's a case where you own a resource that. Okay, then yeah, I get it.
I think you got it. Yeah,
I got it. I would prefer to ASCAST, to be honest. I think for the most part, you're going to be passing the same object in to disposable and as a pipe.
I can get behind the ASCAST. It's just that, like I said earlier, nothing is disposable today that I know of that implements iDuplex pipe. But,
yeah.
You know, as we use this on the client and stuff, I could see that happening.
Because normally the connection itself is the thing that owns the resource. But I guess if someone happened to have implemented a socket pipe, in theory, dispose could be on the implementation, and then they could want to dispose that as well.
Right. But I do think we'd want the leave open parameter on both, is like to go back to that discussion. Like, I'm hearing that the connection should be the owner.
I kind of agree. It's kind of strange to have a leave open. Well,
I mean, it would feel very weird if it wasn't the owner. But
I mean, it'd be things like,
if we want to be safe, we can add a leave open.
like SMTP and FTP where you can like transition to and from TLS multiple times on the same network channel. Like you can be making a new connection that is the TLS context, and it's not supposed to dispose the underlying network stream because you're not done. You're just done with the TLS part.
Yeah, and I guess the question is, does your design then say you funnel everything through a connection in that case, or do you manage that at the stream level because you're switching it out so much?
I don't know. I would have to ask you that question.
Well, I used the stream level when I implemented this in SMTP client, but I mean, it could have been done through a connection. It just didn't seem right to me.
Yeah, I mean, just everywhere that we've ever done, you pass in a stream and it takes ownership of it. People then look for the great, I need to make the wrapper stream type that just wraps the stream and doesn't forward the call to dispose. And then they ask us to add a leave open parameter. So I would just
Everyone has that.
go ahead and add it as an optional parameter on the stream one. And then if we're going to do the dynamic cast on pipe, then we should go ahead and add it on pipe, which and then the documentation would say, if pipe, or if the pipe instance is high disposable, do we call dispose or not?
Or we could just expose the non-disposable stream implementation in the BCL.
And then just get rid of leave open forever. So
Yeah.
I'm going to use that. Do the same thing for pipe. I do like pipe.
Perfect.
Wrap it all. Cool. Okay.
And then just
so we're
deprecate
going
all
with
the
ascast.
overlays, right?
Yeah, I would be worried about an ascast, but if we're adding a leave open parameter, that does kind of slightly hint to the user that something else is going on, so I'd be fine with it.
Or we could do a from pipe of T where T. No, that wouldn't work. Actually, would it?
Where are you going with that?
Can your generic constraint have multiple type parameters?
Oh.
So from pipe T where T is duplex pipe and disposable.
You can't overload on generic constraints though.
Yes, you can constrain to multiple interfaces.
Emo, your robot voice again.
Yeah.
I said you can constrain to multiple interfaces. Yes.
You can, right? And it's and no, it's and in.
It's always
No,
and
it's-
yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. So let's have two overloads.
But you can't overload on generic constraints. I
Yes,
think
you
I've
can't
tried
do that.
No, you have one generic and one non-generic. I mean, I'm actually just being crazy now, but just for discussion.
So if you overload like that, the only time it'll call the generic one is if you explicitly specify the angle brackets, because inference loses to a callable to a lossy conversion on a callable direct.
I do wonder though. So if you had a pipe that was the concrete implementation, not just like an iduplex pipe, would it find the generic instead of the interface, the interface overload?
So if you don't have the angle brackets, assuming that I'm recalling the resolution order, which last time I looked at it was like 3.5, I guess C#4, it would be non-generic methods are evaluated. If it finds any candidate at all, that one wins, and if it didn't, then it tries generic inference.
I see.
If you specified the angle brackets, then of course now it has to be a generic method, so it would ignore any non-generics.
Cool. I'm gonna try anyway, for fun.
All right, so one from pipe overload that has a leave open, and add a leave open to the stream as well. Yeah.
Yeah, defaulted to false. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless you think the default leave open of true makes more sense on a pipe, but on streams usually it's defaulted to false.
We should keep it the same, I think.
Yeah, I think it should be false.
So can you summarize the signature you have right now?
Yeah, let me type it up.
In fact, you could just edit the comment, then we can all see it.
Sure, I'll do that.
Yeah, I will mention that there are an awful lot of default parameters on this. Does it make sense in this case to add the overloads that don't have any defaults, or do you think that it's simply that people will generally specify two-ish of the optional things, but no one will agree on which two they want?
So I was thinking of users of like HTTP client. If you're using that with this, like we have a plain text filter property that we'll get to later, you don't need to specify any of these properties. So I never would. It would really only be for people composing some connection factory for some other purpose.
Yeah, well, it's just we have with optional parameters, we have like a consider adding a simplified overload that doesn't use any optional parameters because it makes IntelliSense prettier as long as you don't actually want any of the optional parameters. But if generally people are going to need to specify at least one of the optional things, then that wouldn't really make sense. So
yeah, I imagine they would probably specify the endpoints at least. So
okay. Yeah. So then adding it at that point really just adds noise, and this seems, given the fact that we're on the fourth meeting of it, it seems like a relatively advanced API, so we don't necessarily need CS 101 to be able to do it easily.
Oh, okay. And I have an advancement. The generic thing doesn't
comments
work.
updated emo.
It's crazy.
All right, does that look good?
I would say typically the leave open is the last parameter, but they're all optional, so I don't have a strong opinion as to where it goes. Really, it's just a question of what do you think the most common call pattern would be? Because if people want to skip that one, like if you think that they would really specify stream properties endpoint, and then let whatever else is off the screen here be defaulted, then it would go last. If you think that it's going to be the most commonly tweaked parameter, then going the first default seems correct. So whatever you think the right ordering is.
Yeah, I don't really imagine this being called without what's it named? Without naming the parameters explicitly, because well, it's possible that you'll need all of them, but I imagine properties is going to be pretty rare. I would almost be okay not defaulting leave open, because it makes it a little more explicit, at least in the pipe case, that we're going to be doing some sort of casting to disposable. What is this madness that Fowler's sharing?
Saying it picked the generic and not the non-generic.
That's crazy. Yeah, and if you get rid of the iDisposable interface, it'll pick the non-generic. It's pretty cool. This is generics hack.
All right. Obviously, the method evaluation order is more complicated than any human can understand. Good thing there's a tool to do it called the compiler.
At least we don't have ADO like C++ has.
I think it was part of the bestest betterness improvements.
It's better.
But betterness can always be better.
All right. Can we move on from these methods? Any objection to what's on the screen?
I have one quick question. Like nothing besides connection extends connection base. Why did we land there? Can you quickly remind me?
When quick APIs are ready, we will have a multiplexed connection.
I see. So this will come later. Got
Yep.
it.
Okay, next thing to review is the sockets HTTP handler. This just exposes a connection factory that we'd use for any TCP-based connections. It may be better named TCP connection factory because the quick one will probably be called quick connection factory. Yeah, and then the plain text filter is if someone wants to filter a connection at the plain text level before it gets encrypted, because the connection factory will always see encrypted bytes.
Is connection factory only TCP, or would it also be UDP?
Well, I mean, technically, it doesn't need to be anything. It can just be in memory. But in practice, the default implementation, we're assuming TCP behavior.
I don't think it's TCP then, right? It's kind of sockets, because if you did domain sockets, that also works with the socket abstraction.
Yeah, I guess the main thing is maybe it's fine to call it connection factory, but when we have quick, we will need to disambiguate that with like a quick connection factory, and in that case, you may not be using quick either. So. Do we make them consistent now, or
well, I mean,
inconsistent later?
Why would quick need a new property?
Because it's different.
Yeah, so you could have a connection factory that's different for both TCP and quick. You might want to specify both.
And it's also side by side.
Yeah, the one connection factory could not implement both.
Fair enough. I guess hopefully when we're doing quick, then we can answer the question of what about quick is special, and can we do the specialness without using the word quick, so that when the next thing comes along, we don't need to do the next or another sibling property.
So what did you mean by side by side? Did you mean that you can't implement both on the same type? Is that what you meant?
Since neither of them are...
Fowler's the one who said side by side. I was waiting for him to answer, but
well, like in Kestrel, it's mostly two different pipelines, for example, right? Because one's a multiplex connection and one's like a stream, and it's just different concepts. I assume that's what he's trying to get at.
Well, but would they both be non-null?
Yeah. I mean, they wouldn't have to be, but it could very easily be.
Right. Because my assumption when you said you were adding another property is, and my question of can they be the same, is that if one of them is not null, the other one is null. But if they can both be non-null, then obviously life is complicated.
Yeah, they can both be non-null. Basically, this one will be used for any HTTP 1 or 2 requests, and the quick one would be used for HTTP 3 requests.
So, like,
right. This is this is HTTP specific, not sockets at the bottom. So, okay, that's the comment of TCP makes a lot more sense once I noticed the middle couple letters. I thought this was socket connections, not HTTP socket connections. Okay. So in that case, TCP maybe makes sense. Unless there is HTTP over domain sockets, in which case maybe saying TCP and lying is good, but I don't have.
Yeah, I mean, one of the requests for this feature was to use HTTP over domain sockets. So you would generally assign a connection factory here if you didn't want to use TCP. There are other reasons, but that's one of them, and. So maybe naming it TCP isn't correct, but I can't really think of a better way to say, like, you know, this will be used for what we would normally use TCP for.
Yeah, I mean, can we name them, like, is it that it's one simplex and the other's multiplex, and can we put those names and people understand them, or?
We could, but simplex isn't the right word. I don't think that there's a singular version of multiplex.
Yeah. Question.
Simple?
Easy. You could use this same factory to do domain sockets though, right? Because if you overall create a socket,
and just set the right flags, it would just work, right? Like magic.
I don't think so. I mean, we're eventually going to call connect async with a DNS endpoint, and so you'd probably need to do a little bit more than just creating a Unix domain socket.
That's unfortunate. It should just work like magic.
Well, you can write your own thing that just ignores the connect with a DNS endpoint.
David, you're the only one here who can write magic.
So question. Question. Where does the DNS endpoint end up coming through in connect?
Yeah.
Who resolves that?
That is left up to the implementation. Like by the default one, we're just going to call socket.connect, which will resolve it for you. But the expectation is that you will know that your connection factory needs to support DNS endpoint because you're assigning it to a socket's HTTP handler.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's any word that you can put on connection factory now to help disambiguate it from quick later, and ideally not use the word quick in whatever you need for quick, that would be my feedback. But I certainly don't have words, so I can't help.
I like connection factory and multiplex connection factory, like what we were calling simplex earlier, which I looked up. Like apparently it's a geometry term. Yeah, I feel like that can be assumed. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess in that case, we're betting that the multiplex connection type will work for any future multiplexed connection type. If that makes sense. Like there wouldn't be a quick 2 that our type for some reason didn't support, but was also multiplexed.
Yeah, I mean, it would require just hoping that we can think far enough in advance, and certainly the creation of something like quick probably invalidated a bunch of assumptions that we already had for how things worked previously, and that's when you end up with bolt-ons. But it would be nice if quick 2 didn't need a second bolt-on, if it just got to fit in the same slot as quick 1.
Good luck.
Yeah.
I said it'd be nice.
I mean, that's my general concern with abstractions, is
dream.
that if you don't know the derivatives, it's hard to vet that the abstractions actually work, right? And right now we only have one implementation to test it for.
Yeah.
That,
3's nice.
Yeah, having at least 2 is, I think, nice. But I also can't think of better terms. I mean, that's the other problem, is that we look at these things here, like, I think we want to avoid a hierarchy that is super messy. And to me, sockets HTTP connection factory kind of looks messy because it's so many terms. So in that sense, I would like the multiplex thing, but my concern is equally that, when you, like, the nice thing with specific names is that you can't really lie, right? Like, it is what it is. Versus if you say multiplex, then you better handle it for all multiplex things.
Why have the socket's name in that type name? Sockets HTTP connection factory. It could just be HTTP connection factory, right?
It doesn't do like Unix domain sockets or anything, right? Like
it could be, but we're talking about sockets HTTP handler right now.
I know, but that was also a bad name.
Possibly, yeah. Let's get to that next.
Well, that wasn't a bad name, right? Because it's an implementation of HTTP handler with sockets, right? That in that case,
well,
the word
so
makes sense.
here.
The thing is, it should have been stream based, not socket based. Because now it's supporting multiple things that have streams. Right?
But stream doesn't have enough. Connection does, right? Like that's the problem.
Yeah.
In hindsight, but we are where we are.
Somebody's getting a phone call. I can tell.
You can tell?
Yeah.
I am getting the phone call. Holy crap. It's spam too.
Yeah, I was like picking up my phone and like, it doesn't sound like me, but I hear a vibration happening.
Yeah, so connection factory and multiplex connection factory, I think, work. If we wanted to be super safe, we could call it TCP connection factory and quick connection factory. It's possible that, let's say, quick 2 does come out and our abstraction does work for it. Maybe you want a separate connection factory for it anyway.
But then you presumably wouldn't have, like, the quick and the quick 2 would be not both non-null at the same time, presumably.
Oh, what? Yeah, they would. I mean, if you let's say you're in a reverse proxy scenario and you want to handle requests for all the HTTP versions that are possible, and you want to inject some sort of diagnostics information in between all your connections, you would absolutely have all of these be non-null.
Interesting. Okay, then maybe this is TCP Connection Factory and the next one's Quick Connection Factory. And if somebody finds a way to make TCP Connection Factory work with Unix domain sockets, then congratulations, Fowler.
Yeah, more power to
So
them.
is sockets HTTP Connection Factory going to be restricted to TCP? Is that the plan?
No, I mean you can pass in anything that implements the connection factory. The property name would
be about sockets HTTP Connection Factory, not the sockets HTTP handlers Connection Factory.
Oh,
the next class.
Sorry, am I jumping ahead? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you are.
Okay.
You could technically override it, but generally you would use the sockets HTTP Connection Factory only if you wanted the default TCP implementation. You would override it if you just wanted to shim like some TCP options onto the socket or something.
So for changing a transport to not use TCP, I would do what? Make a whole new factory, all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So name pipes, new factory.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's why I guess I'm against calling the property TCP Connection Factory. Because
yeah, me too.
Usually it is, but maybe not.
So deterrent.
The term would not be communicating like this is what you need to assign to it. It would be communicating this factory would be used for anything that we would have used TCP for.
Yeah, I'm just trying to avoid the world where we have Quick 3 Connection Factory, Quick 2 Connection Factory, Speedy 7 Connection Factory, and Connection Factory. And then it's like, I don't know what this last one is. It's just one of the things that's not all these other things.
Absolutely.
Just embrace it. Embrace the change. Deprecate the old APIs. Add new ones.
And
can we just
so it's if they're all going to be if there's a potential that they're all non-null, then I feel that this one can't be unlabeled if we think that we're going to have a parallel property structure here.
So
that's
if we
just my gut
simplex
feeling.
To mean this, can we redefine the word?
I mean, people would probably understand what we meant, but they would also make fun of us.
I mean, couldn't we just call it Connection Factory and then call the new one something else?
Sure.
Or HB1 and HB2 factory, and then we have an HB3 one. Like, call it after name it after the protocol it's going to be used for, if that helps.
It would. I hate HB1 and 2 Connection Factory.
Then they call it HTTP and then call the third one HB3 because they're so different. The thing is, it took like how many years to make HB2? Forever years. So like,
yeah, but it took like 3 years to make HTTP3. So
yeah, that's fine.
So it'll take 2 years to make 4.
I mean, if the real thing does boil down to what HTTP protocol version it is, then saying it's a HTTP1 connection factory and HTTP2 connection factory and quick connection factory, then that actually makes sense to me. There is no
it is
generic. What do I do? Like, how do I use this from .NET 8 when .NET 9 introduced the concept of supporting some other protocol? Man, it would have been nice if we had some nice abstraction so that I can just handle things. But if it's a completely new abstraction, then it's a completely new abstraction. So,
or we could do a factory.
No.
Oh god.
That
was in front yesterday.
The protocol selector.
I don't like it.
That gives you a factory based on the thing being created.
But
just have it return an object.
Return a connection factory based on the HTTP version. Oh man.
Yeah. Is there ever a time that you would want a different factory between HTTP1 and HTTP2?
No, and in fact, when you connect to HTTP2, you might end up getting an HTTP1 connection. So they're kind of coupled.
Okay, so it would end up with a name like HTTP1 or 2.
That's nice. It's a good name.
I mean,
It
would
verbose,
look weird in
but
this
I'd be
version,
okay with it.
it would make sense in a later version. So I'm like, anyway, that I think it would be nice if we can put some sort of adjective on this thing.
Do we envision
Yeah.
that these connection factories actually expose net new APIs except for the constructors? Or do they just override the base?
Can you restate that? I'm not sure I understand.
So do you think that these XXX connection factory types actually expose new APIs, or do you think the only APIs that are specific to them are their constructors?
Just their constructors.
Then why have the types at all? Can we get
What do you
away?
mean?
Can we get away with a design where we only have factory methods, and then you effectively have static methods on connection factory that you basically call create HTTP 1 or 2 connection factory, create sockets connection factory, create foo connection factory? Or do we actually need to have them all as public types?
Well, Quick will have a new set of APIs that are different from the current connection type.
But the connection types are fine. I'm just asking about the factories themselves.
Because the contract, because you've said this is just connection factory, you're only calling connect async.
Right.
Right. So what's the quick one going to do different to justify having a separate property?
That's true. I mean, if we want to tell users if you want to use Quick, you're going to have to cast this to a multiplex connection factory because the default connection API won't be meaningful. Like the pipe and the stream won't work.
Well,
right, but if there's going to be a new, because there's the multiplex connection, so if it's going to be a multiplex connection factory, then that explains why it's a new property, because it's incompatible with the previous one. But if it's just side-by-side protocol support, that seems like you should handle it inside your factory.
Well, we could just.
It's also why the factory is broken. Like seriously, other than the funny name.
I mean, we could also make connection factory generic and say connection factory is connection factory of T, where T is connection, and then you could say that create quick connection actually gives you back a connection factory of.
You can't have generic properties
of that one. Sorry, what?
You can't have generic properties.
What do you mean?
You can't have the connection factory property be connection factory of T because there's nowhere to define what the T is. It would have had to come from the type.
Oh yeah, I think Emo's saying that the type would be of T, but there would still be multiple properties on the socket's HTTP handler.
Yeah, I'm just talking about so what I'm envisioning is basically you have connection factory, which is what they all derive from, right? Which they all derive from. Then you have, they have a static type called connection factory. Then connection factory becomes connection factory of T. The static type just houses the extension, the factory methods to actually create the different ones, and then, create quick connection gives you back connection factory of T, and then on sockets HTTP handler or other place where you want to, expose different factories, you just have connection factory of quick connection and connection factory of connection and whatever you want to have there. It just gets rid of the types, right? I mean, you don't achieve a lot, but you basically just reduce the number of cognitive load, because if the only place where people ever would interact with the factories is high up in the stack when they new something up, then that does not add a lot of value, right?
Yeah, I can see that argument.
Because I guess in ASP.NET you would probably use DI to actually say somebody asks for a connection factory, then you register an action that basically gives, a func that gives you back whatever you want to use there.
Sorry, what doesn't add value explicitly? You're right about more or less what ASP.NET does as far as connection factories, but
the types.
I missed the beginning.
So like we just talked about the noise or the complication in the architecture where we have all these different types floating around. If the types themselves are only used to expose constructors, then why have them? Why not just have factory methods somewhere? And then Corey said, well, one of the reasons is because connect async, we can redefine it to give you a more specific version of connection, so you don't have to downcast the guy. And that one you can just solve with a generic parameter of connection factory.
Well, factory methods would work fine for like the built-in like TCP or whatever sockets factory that we make, but users can still define their own.
And that's fine. They can just directly derive from connection factory of T, right? I mean, that's what we do in the implementation, right? I mean, they can do that publicly, but we don't have to give, like, is there any value for a customer to derive from sockets HTTP connection factory? Probably not, right? So why are all these types public?
That's why we have virtuals on it. Yeah,
I guess
we've got a bunch of requests of people wanting to like set very like rare socket options and things like that change like the way ACKs are handled and stuff like that. So we have a virtual create socket where you can create the socket, set whatever options, and everything else is the same.
Fair enough. Like, I mean, like if you envision that people, that's why I was asking, like, it sounds like, basically the new virtuals you defined on the sockets HTTP connection factory is kind of what I meant earlier. It's like, do you expect new APIs? And the answer is yes.
Gotcha. Yeah. So the new APIs would be on like further derived types.
Yes.
It wouldn't be on the base abstractions. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Because then,
So-
you want the types to be public.
Is the recommendation, if I'm following, that maybe a connection of factory of connection and like connection factory of multiplex connection like would be the types that we would use? Like basically the T would be like the connection type. Is that when you talk about making it generic?
I mean, it would work. I don't see any reason it wouldn't work here. And it would save us having to define another class later on. It would make it a little verbose to use, maybe, but...
So I do this internally in Kestrel for managing our connection factories. And I have a generic, like I basically have a connection listener of T. It's the same concept. So it's somewhat useful.
Yeah, I mean, I guess even if we have derived types, we may want to do that so that we don't have to define all these methods with new. It might be cleaner. But generics also come with a price tag, right? Like it does add more complexity and potentially makes your signatures way more ugly.
Yeah, especially if it's not really an open generic or an easily constrainable generic. I mean, I guess maybe the T is connection base.
Yeah, it'd be connection base.
Yep. Yeah, you constrain it.
Yeah, it would most certainly constrain, otherwise it wouldn't be useful. But I think ideally the only party that would instantiate the generic is the derived type.
Yeah, so we would only use that on the 3 classes: the connection factory, connection listener, and connection listener factory.
Right.
But I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work.
Yeah. So in chat, I linked to iConnection listener of T. It's internal, but like we use it because it's somewhat useful. So the only reason it's internal because eventually we plan on switching over to these types. So I don't want to like introduce yet another thing new as I was working on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm torn between the saving on new APIs and the verbosity of actually using them. But yeah. I feel like maybe I could live with the verbosity.
I mean, like it's hard for me to actually visualize both outcomes, so it might be just worthwhile checking what it would look like, and if the result is ugly, then we don't have to do it, right? It was just like one of the concerns I have is I've seen this in many class hierarchies, especially when you have this coupling between factories and concrete types, where almost all factories, I mean, you see this in crypto, for example, that many of these types redefine base types just so they can change the return type. And that's kind of like also not great because it sometimes can cause a lot of confusion when you actually use an API and you know, the static type doesn't match in all cases and then weird things are happening. And some of the APIs where generics are involved are better with that because even if you upcast, it doesn't change the constraint necessarily, right? Because you would only be able to typecast it up to the same T, right? And so like you would not lose the type as much.
Yeah.
But like it's hard to say. Like I mean, the other concern I have, generally speaking, is there's a lot of types in this namespace already, and like this is V1, right? So if we if more connection types show up, then can people actually select the types they want to use? But that's also maybe just namespaces, right? We can just introduce a child namespace maybe and move shit in there.
Well, I think that the thing is, when we add quick, it would mean adding one more type.
Well, it would be two, right?
For a multiplex connection, and then
fair enough.
Everything else would just be FT. At least for the base abstractions, we would have like a quick connection factory somewhere, of course, but
generics instead of this.
So the helpfulness of generics in Kestrel, right, was that we could share some of the logic that manages like the lifetimes of like the quick transport and the TCP transport. The other thing, like when you do generics, you also want basically a base connection factory that has everything but connect async. So you can use it like in non-generic context if you're not doing connect, like for lifetime, for things like,
very good point.
So that's really the usage comparison. I don't think the generic is really that bad here. I'd be for making these generic.
But it also means you can't.
Wait, where? Generics where?
On connection factory, connection listener, and connection listener factory.
No, what?
So they would take a T that is of connection base, so you could pass in either connection or multiplex connection.
Why do I hate that? I mean, I think we did something similar in Castro, and then we also had non-generic variants.
Right, that's exactly. I linked to it in chat.
Okay.
We do it internally in Kestrel because it's useful. So if you're the one managing connections, it's useful. And generally, if you're using a factory and stuff, you are the one managing connections. So, so if you have shared logic for managing these multiplex connections and regular connections, the generics do help a little, remove duplication.
I mean, really, the only code duplication here that we'd be saving is implementing the dispose methods.
Yep. And at that point, you're like you pass them around as disposables.
Yeah, I would opt for not making it generic. I think it would cause so much pain. Generics are viral.
Can multiplex connection derive from connection?
No, that wouldn't make sense. Multiplex connection will not have a pipe and stream on it.
That's why I made the connection base distinction.
Generics aren't really that viral in this case, right? Because first of all, if you're just doing management, you would use like the base connection factory, and it's not viral. And if you know that you have like a TCP connection, then you would be using a connection factory of connection. So
I think that there's very little actual generic code that anyone could write. This would be purely an API savings on our side, I think.
I don't think we should do that. I think you'll end up with too much viral code.
I mean, I would say generics are like pepper, right? Like if you use them right, it can make a meal amazing. But if you use them in the wrong places, it becomes very quickly very awful. So like if you don't see key gains by using them, I would agree with Fowler. Just cut it. But like at the same time, if you find we have to do a lot of like protected virtual new or something, then we really fucked up the hierarchy somewhere. We should have used generics.
Agreed. But now we have what's that thing called? Covariant return type. So hopefully that'll help.
It helps a little bit, but the problem is still that it kind of assumes that the call side is preserving the identity of the derived type.
I don't know that this would actually be viral, Fowler. I think it would. The usage difference would be exactly what I have in my comment in the chat. Like, no one's going to be actually writing generic code over this.
Yeah, it's not viral in Kestrel. The code that it saves, basically having like, in this case, it would be like a connection factory base that would work for like both Quick and TCP, is probably on the order of like 50 lines or so. Like, it's not a ton. Like, the things that's actually shareable is like unbind and dispose. It's not huge.
I'm not hearing a huge benefit to the user, mainly to us, which I care about, but I care less about than what the user experience is.
I'm cold. I'm cold to the
So
generic.
here's what I do like about it, right? Is like we were talking about calling the connection factory like a simplex connection factory, or a connection factory and a multiplex connection factory. And yeah, I was gonna say that like having it being a connection factory of like connection versus connection factory of multiplex connection is helpful, but now that I think about it more, it's not much better than just multiplex connection factory.
Because then we call it connection factory and multiplex connection factory.
Right. I think I would go with connection factory and multiplex connection factory based on what I've heard so far. But yeah.
Thankfully, Quick 2 will be called Quicker, right? And then Quick 3 is quickest.
It'll be more betterer.
More better.
All right, so let's leave. Say no to generics.
Yeah, I mean, I would leave it out for now.
Okay.
Just say no.
And then see where it leads.
All right, so the property name on sockets HTTP handler, HTTP 1 and 2 connection factory or TCP connection factory?
Before we call about the properties, let's talk about the type names, because I feel like they probably should match, right?
I think it should be called HTTP1 and HTTP2 connection factory. Name it after the protocols. Super clear. Ugly as hell, but
yeah, I would go with or instead of and, but
that's true.
I mean, honestly, I'm even cool with just calling it HTTP2, because if the protocol implies that it can also create HTTP1 connection, then that seems fine to me.
I mean, that's not. I don't know how obvious that would be to a user.
Yeah,
the
I
fact
would
that they
suggest HTTP2.
I feel like I'd walk up to it and
stuff like that is no one's going to know that but us.
Yeah, I'd walk up to it and be like, well, HTTP2 is weird, so where's the normal thing?
When you read the summary, and it says this creates both HTTP1 and HTTP2 connections.
I'm okay with HTTP1 and HTTP2 connection factory. Like super wordy, but
then maybe it should be HTTP connection factory, and then we have a different name for HTTP3.
I prefer connection factory at that point. Like HTTP connect. I mean, this is for the HTTP handler. Of course, it's an HTTP connection factory. Just call it connection factory at that point.
Yeah, the annoying thing about calling it HTTP3 connection factory is what if HTTP4 ends up using quick as well. So we wanted to call it HTTP3 and HTTP4 connection factory.
All right. The answer is we call this one connection factory, and woe be the developer who cares once you add support for quick.
Yeah, I think so.
Sure. Okay, let's move on.
Seems fine.
All right. Plain text filter.
I'm sorry, future developers.
If you're watching this.
Probably going to be me. Okay. Plain text filter. Are we okay with that one? This just inserts a filter before we do any encryption.
So where is that on the screen?
Oh, it was the property right after connection factory.
Oh, sorry.
Now that we spent an hour on that line, we move to the next line.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the signature. But other than that,
I guess what guarantees are here? Do you know that this is always going to be the raw message?
Yeah.
Okay. That this can't be like this couldn't already be past a pipeline stage that already did TLS or gzip or anything weird like that.
No, this happens before we send any bytes to the user's connection factory. So it'll be gzipped, yes. I guess the proper wording here would be unencrypted filter, something along those lines.
I mean, for my department, that's the same thing. I'm just wondering if this is somebody trying to log, like they're trying to write their version of in-process Fiddler for just this one.
Well, plain text works actually, because gzip would be you would still have the ungzipped envelope of HTTP, which is what we're really talking about. Gzip would be the content.
Okay. Yeah. So it seems like a reasonable name to me, and I'm just trying to make sure the semantics to make sure that the name's reasonable, and it seems like it is.
Okay.
Is plain text a word?
It's a cryptography word.
So that
I'm
means
happy
no.
with it. It's the opposite of ciphertext.
I just wondering whether the T should be capitalized, I guess. So are we happy with this func? Like, what happens if you ever discover you would like to pass another parameter to this guy?
Well, the HTTP request message has a property bag on it. The connection has a property bag on it. I think we're safe there.
Because you only have one chance. So you better be really sure that that's what you want.
Yeah.
All right, then. Future Corey, this was the day where you went wrong.
Let it be the first day of many. All right. Sockets HTTP connection factory. This is just our default implementation. Essentially, it just creates a socket and sets no delay on it. But you can override create socket if you want to set socket options pre-connect. And if you want to do some funky, like, custom DNS resolution or something like that, you could override establish connection async and do that there.
So can we simplify the name? Because I think earlier you said something we could just call it sockets connection factory.
No, because sockets connection factory is for any socket, and this one is for HTTP client.
Yeah. Because the next class is sockets connection factory.
Yeah.
Wasn't the suggestion to call it HTTP connection factory then or something? I thought that was a proposal for a simplified name earlier.
Yeah, I mean, that was a criticism. We called it sockets HTTP handler when this is no longer purely sockets based.
Oh,
now that we have this, so yeah. But we can't change that type. So, I mean, being consistent with the existing type and calling it sockets HTTP connection factory, it's a long name, but it's discoverable.
I mean, I know that you would use it with the sockets HTTP handler as the default connection factory if one were inclined to build such a thing. But what about it relates to the sockets HTTP handler? Because is this generically HTTP? Is this generically because the fact that you're dealing with HTTP request message seems like it could just be an HTTP connection factory. Couldn't it?
Yeah, that's actually a great point. Kind of. I mean, so we are. You notice these overloads, they pull out a request message. To get that, we insert a property. We call connect async with a property that is an internal type to sockets HTTP handler. So this wouldn't be usable by like a third-party HTTP message handler implementation.
All right, then it's fine. Long, ugly name, who cares? Yeah, I mean, really the point there is if the type only works with sockets HTTP handler, then it's a smaller name is misleading. So it seems. So,
but I mean, the question I think still is there, like, how is this connection visible in the consuming code? Like, where do I pass in the sockets HTTP handler?
Well, the sockets HTTP handler you give to HTTP client like today. What you would do is you would call sockets handler dot connection factory equals new sockets HTTP connection factory.
Or equal Emo's awesome sockets HTTP connection factory.
Yeah.
So what was the assignment target?
That property we spent an hour naming.
I see.
Yeah.
It really was an hour.
Yeah, it was. It's awesome.
I see. So yeah, I guess for the consuming code it will be obvious how they're related. I guess is then the summary of that.
Yeah. And then you're content with your protected virtuals. That's all the information that you think that any implementation would reasonably need for either of those two operations.
Yep. I mean, again, similar to before, we have two property bags to work with here, one within the message and one within the connection properties. So we're safe for expanding this later. It may not be clean, but we've had a property bag forever and we've never actually used it. So I suspect that we probably won't need to add more here.
Okay. And I assume that you feel confident that you can explain in documentation when create socket versus establish connection gets called?
Yep.
Okay.
Establish connection calls create socket, basically, to create its socket.
All right.
I mean, one of them is, the polyg one is only one of them, right? So for the consumer...
Well, both the virtuals it's adding are both protected.
Yeah, they're both protected.
So presumably it's you expect easy overrides to only need to override create socket, complicated overrides to establish or to do establish connection async, and if you're overriding connect async, why did you derive this type?
Yes.
Yeah, if you're overriding connect async, that pulls out like the property bags. It doesn't make sense to overload that. Right. Essentially, the benefit, like we could even get by saying don't have established connection async, but the benefit there is that we pulled out the message for the user already, so it's slightly easier to implement this in the HTTP context.
No, I actually like the idea of like sealing the other one and then you basically add new virtuals that are very specific in nature. That makes more sense.
Yeah. I'm just
sealed, right?
Yep, sealed override, connect async. So I'm just right. So you have the two virtuals because one is your common, the inside operation is what you expect most people want to do, but sometimes they may want to do something slightly higher level, and so you've exposed the higher level virtual for them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you said that the higher level one, if you were to override that, just saves a little bit of work? Like how little?
Maybe you already have a cached socket.
It saves us. Well, the established connection async. This whole type saves us having to expose an additional API of like a HTTP connection properties that stores the HTTP request message.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, just on the scale of number of lines of code, how long is established connection async? If most of the work is in create socket.
Well, both of these are actually very small. Create socket currently is like a 2-liner, and established connection async I think is like 20 maybe. Yeah, and I suspect most people who would override this type, like very few people will. Most of them will just want to set a socket option. Yeah.
So there is some amount of work in established connection async that they could conceivably want to alter.
Yes.
But probably they just want to alter how the socket got created. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It sounds like a reasonable abstraction to me, barring complaints.
Yeah, seems good.
All right.
I was thinking like if established connection was super simple, then maybe you can get rid of it. But yeah, I think you explained why we need it.
Yeah. Just to make sure we have a good ordering here, is there anything else related to HTTP client and sockets HTTP handler?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Sockets connection factory. This basically does the same thing as the sockets HTTP connection factory, except it doesn't set the HTTP specific options. So you can say like what type of socket you want, and connect async just calls connect on the socket with your endpoint. Similarly, you can override create socket if you want to set some options, but not have to implement your entire new connection factory type. There's also a create stream and create pipe if you want to customize that. Like I know pipe has a whole bunch of options on it, like buffer sizes and memory pools and things like that. So it was primarily added for the pipe, but I figure for
the first method after the last constructor, which I guess is the first method, is that sealed override or new? Does that feel like
you're right?
Should be the override.
Yeah, that should be an override.
Okay, and are you doing it as sealed override or open override?
It's open.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Although, I mean, I suppose it could be sealed. If you really wanted to override the connect async method, you're basically, that's where all the functionality is in this. So it wouldn't make sense.
Well, yeah. I mean, would it ever make sense that someone would want to, because you could override it to filter the endpoint or something else, but if there's another place that you could get that information, then you wouldn't necessarily need to do it there.
That's a good point.
Like if you wanted to throw for IPv6 link local addresses and be like, hey, no, we're not talking. So sort of a firewall filter in front of your connection factory.
That's true. That's a good point.
But if you would still get that as the endpoint into create socket, you could throw from there just as easily as from connect async. So
yeah, I mean, an additional feature that you might want is you could, for instance, you could change DNS resolution inside of connect async and then call the base connect with an explicit IP versus DNS. Similarly, create stream and create pipe are non-trivial implementations, so we'd be saving the user having to implement those themselves.
But you could, to that point, you could call the base implementation of like create socket when in the pass-through case, and then like throw otherwise, right?
Exactly. That's why I'm saying like I do see cases where people could override connect async and want to use the other features on there.
But why wouldn't you override one of the other virtuals is the question. And why is that different than the one that we just sealed above?
Well, the one we sealed above is very specific to HTTP, and it exposed the thing that you would want to override in a separate method in the established connection async. So
I'd argue that you could do this kind of filtering or throwing that you're talking about in connect async in create socket, right? Like, why couldn't you?
Yep.
So why would you not seal connect async just like you did with the HTTP connection factory?
Well, like the example I said of DNS resolution, you get a DNS endpoint. The default behavior is whatever socket.connect does with a DNS endpoint. Maybe you want to use a smarter thing like a DNS cache or something.
But you could override create socket.
Right.
Yeah, what Stefan said.
Create socket will not do the actual connect call.
Who does the connect call?
That's connect async.
But create socket
a hot socket
was given an endpoint.
Yes.
Right.
So it's saying give me a socket that works for this endpoint.
But it's not actually connecting to that endpoint.
No, it's not. That's why there's connect async.
Maybe it should. If it's being called by connect async, it could, right? Like connect async could say, I'm delegating the creation of the socket and connecting.
I mean,
it would have to be async though, right?
The purpose of the create socket overload is if someone wants just the default behavior, but they want to set some options. The bulk of the work is in connect async here.
Yeah, I mean, if there's work in connect async that someone would want to customize, being an open override is sensible. And
yeah,
but if it's that they may want to change like one line of code, then it's maybe that's a place that we want a different abstraction. But if you don't think that exists yet, then we don't need it.
Well, what is the one line of code? What do you mean?
Well, like if the only scenario that you can come up with is of what they would want to do differently is change the endpoint between what was passed in and create socket, then maybe you want a virtual resolve endpoint, which default just returns the input parameter.
Yeah, that's true.
If that's the only thing they would change, then now you can have a sealed override with, here are the 4 things this does. It resolves an override, it creates a socket, and then it creates a stream or pipe.
Yeah, although, well, one of the things that we're going to implement ourselves is this thing called Happy Eyeballs that actually has parallel connects going on. So it's not just a resolve and then connect. It's a resolve, launch a whole bunch of connections, and then pick one, whatever connects first. So just having a resolve wouldn't allow someone to implement that. I mean, resolve is just the first thing that I could think of here. I feel like this is kind of open-ended enough that I wouldn't be comfortable saying we could seal this off.
Okay. I mean, the question essentially just becomes, unless sockets somewhere is explicitly having a thing typed as it needs a sockets connection factory, why would someone override this if they were replacing that much stuff instead of just writing their own connection factory? And
yeah, I mean, if they're replacing tons of it, then absolutely. Although this does remove, you could call base.connect async and remove a whole bunch of boilerplate for yourself still.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it's fine. Really, the question is the inconsistency of the 2 types that are adjacent on screen. So.
Mm-hmm.
I have to go soon. I have one question before I go. We didn't resolve the throwing behavior of stream and pipe, right?
We were waiting for feedback from you.
Okay.
Are we talking about cancellation or something else?
No, throwing if you access one and then you access the other. That behavior.
We're doing that, right?
I hope
we are
not.
throwing, yes.
I hope not. So I hope before we throw, we like implement this everywhere and then try using it. Because I have this, I mean, I don't even know how this would work in Castro. Because we start with a stream. Sorry, I guess we're all piped there.
Yeah,
today.
it would work.
But then if we actually use these types, would it still work?
Well,
So,
this is if you read
make it
both
work.
the pipe and the stream property, because those are exposed as properties, right?
Right. So what ends up happening, right? If somebody uses the sockets connection factory or listener, and then they use the SSL, is that in here?
Are you talking about the peeking scenario where you want to peek at the handshake?
Yeah, you pick out the handshake, look at some bytes, parse some things,
Using
and
pipes and
resume.
then SSL stream.
then it blows up, right?
Yeah, because sockets can't unread. Or sorry, streams
sockets can't unread. Agreed. So the person has to do the needful to put the bytes back.
Right, basically. You basically have to create a new connection at that point.
Okay, so the behavior is if you read the pipe, you should just create a new connection, just in case.
If you want to backtrack, like basically, if you want to like reset to where.
Not about backtracking. If the stream is a view over the pipe, then you always have the right view.
Right. So if you want to read something and then allow some further thing to read something using either the pipe or the stream, it's going to have to be basically a fresh connection.
No, so I'm trying to. So if the stream is a view over the pipe, and the pipe is the source of truth because that's how your transport was implemented.
We can make that work. Is your point?
Right, and I want to understand what layer is throwing. Is it like something in the core that you can't override, or is it something higher up that if you replace
you can't override it? It's enforced.
Yeah, that's why I don't like. So I think it would be fine to have that behavior by default if the component throwing could not possibly know. But if the component made it such that the pipe was the main thing and then the stream was a wrapper over the pipe, that works fine.
I like that idea.
So would you want to make pipe and stream virtual? So because that's where the throwing exists right now.
But it would know. Like you could make the default. I guess I don't know how you're going to implement it where each one understands how to call the other one and do the right wrapping. But if pipe being the underlying thing works, then you could make it only throw if you access the stream and then access a pipe over the stream where the stream was the underlying type. But
yeah, that seems like crazy Kestrel shenanigans that no one else would ever want to do.
It's not
we would do it.
All it is like it's completely. It seems logical that if you were to replace the pipe and the stream ended up being a wrapper over the pipe, like so, let's say you want to do this, how would you do it? And like not have it explode horribly, because the issue is in the pipeline you have no idea how it was configured.
So your problem is you have a pipe and you need to pass something a stream.
No. I need to call the next thing in the chain, and the next thing in the chain maybe looking at the stream.
After I've already used the pipe internally.
Right.
Yeah, we can make that work. And it's easier than what we already do in Kestrel because we don't have to deal with setters on the pipe and stream.
Exactly.
So it's actually not as bad as I was originally thinking. Yeah, so if pipe's the source of truth, then there's no reason that you can't go back and forth between using the two. It's true.
So as long as that's possible, I'll be happy. So the API design should allow for that, even if the default is to throw.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like such a big complexity that I would expect no one outside of this meeting to ever do that. I don't like. You could make it virtual though. Like that's. Well, maybe Ben Adams. He's not in the meeting.
No. So, the issue is if you grab a component off the shelf that is pre-written and you plop in a pipeline, this is where you have the issue. It's not about authoring yourself. It's about not knowing what's happening in between the layers. And I think is okay to throw if you know for a fact that this can't work. But if someone did the actual due diligence to wrap the thing properly and expose the right properties, then it seems like it should work. Right. And you could argue, if you touch one property, wrap the whole connection and call next. That's how you do this whole thing, right? But that seems expensive if you don't need to do it that way.
So along that same line of thinking, David, you could argue that like the FromPipe thing should create a connection where you can just like alternate between the two like properties.
Yeah, exactly.
The problem that I see with that, as much as I love it, is that there will be things that you can do on like Kestrel connections that you can't on like, socket HTTP connection factory connections, which is unfortunate.
I get it.
Because the notion that if you access both things, that always throws is easy to reason about. If it sometimes works, that's hard to reason about.
Runtime errors just suck in general.
Exactly. But at least if it's consistent, hopefully you catch it in your unit test or whatever. And it's,
Well, this would not be for like the reusability, NuGet package of connection factory stuff case. It would mainly be for like I am implementing all the factory types within my library, and I expect this to work because I wrote them.
I don't see how you can say that. Like, if somebody wanted to implement something and the pipe property was there and they used it, and they put it on NuGet, how would they know that it was going to be used?
I'm saying
in a pipeline
if it throws always, then everyone is consistent. If it throws sometimes, then it's chaos.
Who is everyone?
It only works if you specifically implemented it yourself or are very careful.
But who is everyone when you have an arbitrary set of components that use either one? Like, how would you know? And then you end up finding a bug on the component saying, "Hey, can you fix your thing to use one or the other?" And then both parties do that.
Can you give me an example, like not in this meeting, but offline? Can you send me an example of where Kestrel is switching between a stream and a pipe?
We don't yet. we'll
I just like to see it.
It's not switching, but the concrete scenario that I can think of right here is SSL stream exists in the BCL, right? And for the SSL component, you wrap the stream and you get a new one, and you get a new connection back based on that stream. Code can run before that can look at the bytes, peek at the bytes to find the handshake. Imagine we didn't have the new feature in SSL stream that exposed that feature. You parse the payload, you find the handshake, you store stuff, and then you resume the pipeline.
Right. So then you pass the stream that we basically already peeked at using the pipe to SSL stream. So that would be the scenario. We could, of course, make that work by
wrapping the connection.
Right. And like, if we're going to be the ones, yeah, I mean, that's exactly it.
All right. I have to build, but that, I mean, if wrapping the connection is the way to go, then we tell people that if you touch the stream, wrap the component, and then carry on.
Right. If you read and you're passing the connection to something else that might use the pipe or the stream, then yeah, exactly. Or write for that matter. But yeah.
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 That could be it.
Do it.
Yeah, that could be it. We'll see how efficient it is. Grrr. But make it virtual.
Why don't we prototype something? I'm not convinced that anyone will actually use this. I would love to see actual code do this and have like a side-by-side comparison saying like, okay, this is definitely better one way or the other.
Do what? Use the pipe? Because if any code uses the opposite object model, the whole thing falls apart.
Well, I think the notion here is if you're something in the middle, then you are a connection, and you've read the underlying connection that went into you, and you're only exposing one of the, or someone can only access you in one of the two modes. You'll only access the thing that you're wrapping in one of the two modes. Everything will stay consistent because you either get the pipe stream or the stream pipe if you crossed parity, but you're not going to access the same underlying source in two different modes.
I super agree. It just kind of works against the fact that someone else plugged in something before you, right?
I don't think we're going to be switching modes or like parts of the pipeline so much that the wrapping is going to be like super crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But yeah, writing something like the is this TLS or not sniffer, and being able to prove it as a point of as a proof of concept seems like a good idea.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Bye.
All right. So sockets listener factory.
Yep. It's basically the same thing as sockets connection factory, except it has bind instead of a connect. There's an override there that isn't shown.
That's fine. Overrides don't really matter for API design. I assume you implemented the type. That's
yeah, that's the basic idea.
Well, I mean, it's a question of is the class abstract, and then is the override sealed? Same as the previous question.
But, yeah. So I mean, in this case, it's doing significantly less. Like there's no DNS resolution type scenario when you're a listener and just accepting something new. So I could see us making it sealed in this case. Stefan, can you think of any scenario where you'd want to customize the accept behavior?
Sorry, what's sealed?
Sockets
like
listener factory dot accept.
Well, this is a connection factory, so it's connect async, right?
We've moved on to sockets listener factory, right?
But sockets listener factory extends connection factory. Does connection factory have both connect and listen?
Oh,
or connect and accept?
That's a typo. That it should not be extending that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It should be extending.
I was about to say, like it doesn't. What are we looking at?
Okay, what does sockets listener factory really extend?
Connection listener factory.
Okay.
It's kind of the same as like overriding connect async, right? Like, I don't think so. Maybe like, oh, here's a reason. Throttling, probably, right? Like, what if you want to do connection throttling at the transport layer? Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that like it would be common, but if you want to come up with like a hypothetical reason why you would.
But would you throttle on bind?
Not on bind. Sorry. Talking about accept. You're talking specifically about bind. Changing endpoints, I suppose.
All right. So I just updated it with the override so we understand that it's using bind. Yeah, so it would be bind. Basically, you'd have to re-implement connection listener yourself in that case. So it kind of makes. I feel like you would just implement your own listener factory.
I feel like that could be made. You can make that case for anything that we're sealing, right? Like even with the sockets, like HTTP connection factory kind of stuff, like where we decide that we're going to let you override connect async, like to allow you to change endpoints and stuff, like could create your own factory.
The behavior, the code in sockets listener factory is basically new socket and .bind and then new connection listener. Like it's the shortest type in here. So we're not saving the users anything by making this overwritable.
Maybe. I mean, the way I feel is for take connect async on the sockets HTTP connection factory. Like you could decorate that, and that'd be really short implementation. Like if we sealed connect async and you wanted to create your own factory that had your own connect async that changed endpoints and stuff like we were talking about earlier, you could just have like an inner sockets HTTP connection factory, and it'd also be very simple. So I don't see how that argument's any different.
Well, it's based on the API surface and the implementation. Like it's very different, right? Like the other one has actual like tons of implementation. This has a few one-liners.
But you could turn the like big implementation to a one-liner by decorating, right? Like to get that same functionality. So you could seal connect async, and it would still be like really simple to create
yeah,
a
if we wanted to
factory
expose more APIs.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of being inconsistent with the sealed and unsealed is the only thing. I'd rather just like pick a lane and stick in it.
Well, we're not being inconsistent here. The only thing we've sealed is the HTTP client specific method. These are the generic sockets methods here.
Maybe I'm not seeing the right screen. Yeah, I feel like I have like an outdated look at the screen.
Okay,
share,
so you're saying it would be too inconsistent for sockets connection factory .connect async to be unsealed, but then bind async to be sealed.
Yeah, it's just a little weird to me.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I think so far, as you said, the only thing that you've sealed is the one that was specifically tied to some internal state between sockets HTTP handler and that connection factory. And so the sealing, yeah, if the sealing doesn't make sense, then don't do it. I mean, yes, it is sealed to unsealed is the changeable state, but
I mean, we don't lose anything here by keeping this unsealed. So I'm fine doing that. It just I feel like if you're overriding this, like you're not really saving yourself anything.
I just wish we had like a better bright line between sealed and unsealed rather than like developer effort, especially when for the stuff that we basically left virtual, the scenarios for it wouldn't be much more difficult if they were sealed, like with the decorator pattern. So I feel like the code cost argument is a weak one as far as sealing or unsealing. You know what I mean? Like the developer cost, like it's weak because even if everything was sealed everywhere, you just do decorators like for these scenarios, and it would be more or less the same.
Well, and then the cost is exploding our API service, right?
Why is the cost exploding? If we made everything sealed, like I'm fine as long as we're consistent.
Well, I don't necessarily know that I care about consistency in sealed and unsealed in these two different APIs, but I don't really mind keeping this unsealed. I'm just saying, like, I don't think it would be useful for someone to override it.
Yeah, the biggest. So I was like, I know that we have something about sealing with overrides in the guidelines. Consider sealing members that you override, and then the justification is think about it. But basically, it seems to be suggesting of if you're overriding multiple things and it wouldn't make sense. So, like if you're a stream class and you've overridden a couple things, you know how they're interacting with each other, and it wouldn't make sense for someone to override part of that behavior anymore, then seal it. So it's really just reminding you that every override is still virtual, and if you now wish it wasn't virtual, then seal it. And
right. Yeah. So it wouldn't break any of the implementation for this to be unsealed and someone to provide a completely custom implementation. So we can leave it unsealed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't actually feel very strongly. I just don't. I just feel like the logic is very ambiguous for sealed and unsealed. So I was just trying to get a better understanding. Like, is it really about developer effort to?
Yeah, and maybe it's not. I mean, there's certainly other factors too. So, okay. Any other comments on this type?
I'll be right back. The screen's been frozen for me for a while.
Okay. All right. SSL connection stuff. These are very, the connection factory and listener factory are both very trivial. It's just a constructor. The quote API surface is actually exposed through the property bags. So it's really more of a need for documentation there. The main thing to consider is this SSL connection properties type. We technically would only need this SSL connection properties type if we wanted to support third-party SSL implementations. Like if someone doesn't want to use SSL Stream, they've got their own thing. I know we've had requests to use like OpenSSL on Windows. This would be an escape hatch if someone really wanted to do that. But like if we wanted to trim the API surface, we could easily say, you know what, we're going to expose the SSL Stream. And that's how everyone is going to get their SSL properties.
Do you have a sense of how much people look at the legacy cipher algorithm, hash algorithm, key exchange algorithm properties? Like I know that they're, let's call it wrong a lot. So are they worth re-exposing?
HTTP client prints them out in diagnostics, but we could stop doing that.
Because I feel like with SSL Stream, they've stopped being wrong after TLS1. Sorry, they've stopped being right after TLS1. That like,
if there's something, I'm not an expert in what's right or wrong on this one. So if you think there's some better things that we could expose and not expose the old ones, then
yeah, I mean it's weird because like the key exchange, I think it's at least like the key exchange algorithm is usually wrong because it'll say like RSA, but if it was using perfect forward sequency, the answer is actually ECDHE. RSA was simply the server certificate algorithm, and it's that these properties were the breakdowns of what SSL2 and SSL3 cipher suites looked like, and And so it's the trying to. It was a thing that S-Channel did, therefore SSL Stream did transparently, to just try and be like, here's some data about how we connected without you needing to understand how this protocol actually works. And then they made it complicated, where now you get something like, AAS GCM. Well, what's the hash algorithm? Well, there wasn't one because we didn't use external hashing on the thing. We use GCM because it's a self modification detecting cipher, and so we didn't need the MAC. And so I feel that I don't know what the state that they're actually in anymore. I just know that they were a hard thing for us to map from in the Linux PAL and the Apple PAL. We actually had to just write a thing that understands every cipher suite and then just expands the data so that we can fill in the legacy properties. But I think in contrast, I don't know that we actually know the cipher suite on Windows. If we know the actual cipher suite that was selected, then we could drop all this metadata stuff and just be like, here's the cipher suite, deal with it yourself.
That's a compelling argument to me. I don't think we have enough time in .NET 5 to design something, but I think it'd probably be worth taking a look at that.
Well, because we have you have the cipher suite there, and it's if that value is getting actually populated correctly on SSL Stream on Windows, then you can drop everything above local certificate because it's redundant.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, someone might want the API of, hey, I have this cipher suite. Why won't you tell me what the cipher algorithm strength was? It's like, well, because it's hard. How about you just don't care, like 99% of people?
Yeah, I mean, I would suspect most people probably don't have. I honestly don't know what you would use that for, other than diagnostics.
Yeah, because if you were going to reject it for being too weak, then you should have limited your cipher suites before connecting.
Right.
So, yeah. So my feedback would be based on my understanding of what goes into this data and how inaccurate it can be, plus the fact that it means that we have to keep modeling things as new concepts of an exchange algorithm type gets added. That if you can drop everything above local certificate, which would be if TLS cipher suite, negotiated cipher suite gets populated correctly on Windows, then I would drop all the breakdown fields.
Okay.
And what's a transport context?
I have no idea. I honestly have no idea. HTTP client passes it around, but I've never seen anyone actually use it.
Okay. I have no idea what that property is.
Yeah. In that case, can we approve this with the follow-up that we can check the implementation really quick, and if it is populating negotiated cipher suite properly, then we drop everything else. We drop the other stuff.
And if transport context also isn't needed, then
that one's definitely needed. I don't know why, but it's needed.
Okay. I mean, you say that you're exposing this way in case someone ever wanted to write a different TLS provider and it would all plumb in with the new stuff correctly. But is that even a thing that someone could build in a third-party implementation? I don't even know what that type is.
True.
So that's really my question, is if this is there for third-party extension or extensibility, is it actually something a third party can do?
Mm-hmm. The only thing that type exposes is a Git channel binding. Oh, this is probably something we added for WCF, which is even more of a black box to me.
I feel like channel binding was like all the rage for like 6 weeks, and then everybody decided it was terrible.
Yeah,
I wish it would have been 6 weeks.
Yeah, the real feedback on this is you can add things in later versions. You can't take them away. So anything that we don't think is useful on this property type, let's try and trim out.
Mm-hmm.
I understand local certificate because that tells you what got used after SNI. I understand remote certificate like each of those tell you what actually happened. Negotiated cipher suite is what actually happened. Application protocol matters if you're doing that stuff, and ALPN, that's what it's called. And so I can understand those, the sort of middle bottom ones. The rest, I wonder if you can get rid of, at least in this version.
So, if
we could
Kestrel's going to, yeah, we do like log some of this stuff in Kestrel and expose it via feature. I can't explain what all of it is, but I do know we kind of pass it through. And for example, like Barry Dorrance is kind of adamant that we expose a lot of this stuff for customers to have like metrics on like key strength and so forth.
All right, so as an offline activity, see what you can trim for checking in. Because I'm pretty sure the key exchange algorithm and key exchange strength are no longer relevant. Once SSL stream supports, or actually it should already be true with the GCM things, that the hash algorithm type is probably nonsense and the hash strength is going to be nonsense. The only thing that really might make sense is cipher strength. But yeah, I know that we ended up with a bunch of trying to figure out how things actually were being returned by Windows, because of course SSL stream on Windows doesn't know what any of these things means. It's just returning properties from schannel, which documents them as the name of the thing.
Yeah.
Returns the algorithm used for key exchange. Okay. So our documentation says returns the algorithm used for key exchange. And for once TLS 1.2 came along, I think that it was in many of these things returning unmapped values, because Windows had added new values that just no one had tests for. And then we had to go figure out what the magic constants were on Linux. So anyway, that's my feedback on that.
Okay. Because we are kind of running up closer to a deadline, if we did not have time or just couldn't complete the work to kind of do that research, HTTP client would be fine leaving those off. Stefan, would Kestrel still be able to use this if those were not there?
We might have to like row. That'd be tough, like, because I wouldn't want to like break people who are currently logging this stuff. We might have to like put in dummy values. Like I don't know. Like we'd have to talk to Barry. But if they're already nonsense, then maybe we can throw in like a dummy value or something if it's not available. I don't want to have to like continue using our own. Like I want to be able to share like the TLS kind of middleware kind of stuff.
Yeah, my recollection is the more modern your cipher suite is, the more nonsense these values are. But I generally try to avoid interacting with SSL stream, so I could be wrong.
Okay. Yeah, let me reach out to Barry. I'll get Tomas in there too, and we can kind of hash out how useful these things actually are and where to go from there.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that it's not like the most heavily used like features in ASP.NET, so we might be able to make some breaking changes there. But yeah, probably not this late for 5.0 to make like we'll see, maybe, but
right. Okay.
Scroll bar looks awfully tantalizingly close to the bottom.
It is at the bottom. Well, there's one more class beneath that, but it's just the SSL listener factory that is just as empty.
So then I guess we can approve this thing.
Oh,
my
scroll
God.
a little bit, Eamon.
Oh, you did that? All right.
Don't want to give him a blank check on the last thing.
Sure, it's good. Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't
it's
even
changed
compile,
real
so
time.
because the constructor is not named the same as the type.
Whoops.
And I think there was just a refresh that changed it from a listener factory back to a connection factory. So
That's weird. Yeah, it's going back and forth.
So these exist as they exist as public types because you need a side effect of the implementation.
So
who creates them is I guess the question.
Kestrel would, hopefully.
Yeah, this would just be whatever. If a user needs TLS on a connection, they would add these to their layering.
Okay, so this SSL connection. Oh, I see. So the SSL connection factory is wrapping some other factory, and it's doing all the TLS.
Exactly.
Well,
so
but
it's basically just calling. It's initializing an SSL stream and calling.
Yeah, where are your server options and client options and stuff?
So that's what those comments are. Those get passed in through the connection properties.
Okay. Do we have that? Oh, I see. So we'll just use SSL client authentication options like we do already.
So these are supposed to...
Or server, of course.
So you do this, and then you now have to create the options thing and hide it in. So this is the first time that we've seen something, I think, that actually required using the property bag.
Yep. Right, and this is necessary. Like, it can't be a constructor or anything unless it was callback based, and you wouldn't want that. I think this is good.
Okay, well, because it feels different than the sockets factory, which was you tell it in the constructor we're being a TCP socket and other things, but this one is it learns it from ambient state of how to do TLS. So it just, to me, feels a little mishmashed, but maybe it makes sense to people who do networking.
I think the reason that you'd want it to be a feature is because you'd want to be able to control the options on a per connection basis.
Yeah, I mean, you do make a good point, Jeremy. Like, at least with the sockets connection factory, there is an argument of like maybe you want to change the address family on a per connect basis. Dual mode sockets generally remove the need for that, but yeah, it could be a thing.
I mean, you could always add a default constructor to that one later, and that one ends up reading it out of the property bag instead of building it itself from constructor parameters. But okay, so these are public. I want the implementation that this does, but they didn't need to expose custom API because they're just the implementation.
Yep, it just throws an SSL stream on top of the stream that it gets from the base.
And if somebody was doing a custom TLS implementation, then they would only need to derive connection factory and then just promise to answer the question for what TLS properties happened.
Exactly.
So this all becomes very loose type. I sniffed some memory out somewhere and life got happy.
Convention based, yeah. That's what we call it when we want to be nice to it. It's convention based.
Fair enough.
But yeah, weekly types for sure in that case. The feature collections basically are.
So I know one of Tobe's comments on this type was that he would prefer to not put these SSL things in there if Kestrel and HTTP client weren't going to use them. We could easily get away with not having this in both, I think, if we really wanted to. So if we aren't sure about it, we could just say no, wait for done at 6. But
so you're saying we could easily internalize this basically, so just have our own custom.
Yeah, I mean, this is just calling SSL stream, right? And that's super easy right now. So this would mainly be we would be sharing implementation, but it wouldn't really be like huge between the two. This would mainly be for users who want to compose connection factories and insert TLS in their own thing.
Right. So to go back to SMTP with late start TLS.
Yeah. So this wouldn't be appropriate for that.
Okay. So they're still going to have to do complicated work, and if you're doing either FTPS or SFTP, whichever one is TCP or TLS on the outside. You could use this, but if we don't make it public, it's like 20 lines of code.
Yeah, basically.
And if we don't make those public, the factories, the SSL connection factory, listener factory, then we probably wouldn't make SSL connection properties public at that point either. We'd wait for 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. So given that we are out of time and we're a little iffy on the structure of the property thing, I would hold back the TLS specific things for another version.
The thing about it is probably one of the better proofs of the abstraction, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but the only real proof of it is once, like, we have this complicated, we need a bunch of things to happen together, right? It's you would expose the property type and maybe these factories so that you can get the implementation from it, and somebody needs to provide an alternate implementation of TLS and show that everything works happy with that all the SSL stream options are all that they need to connect to their thing, and that that you really do have pluggable TLS at that point. And I don't know that there's time enough left to prove that is correct.
Yeah, and even sharing the base transport is pretty big, but this would be like the biggest middleware that we'd consider sharing at the moment.
Yeah. So I think it's reasonable given the things that it says, but if
I'm 100% fine leaving
punt
this
it,
off.
I'd punt it.
Yeah, the main. I think the main argument for this is if someone wants to layer SSL stream inside of in between other connection factory things, they would then have to implement this type themselves.
Yeah, I mean yeah, it's just a question of if this is only really 20 lines of code, then that's easily a blog post, and then if nothing changes between this release and next release, then it becomes a public class. And because it's
Right.
The question is it a viable sample at this time, or does it need to be a public type? And
yeah,
I'm viable sample.
100% fine leaving this off. I actually almost took it off before this meeting because I had the same thoughts. So
yeah,
sounds
leave
good.
it out.
Yep.
Red code's the best code.
Till they come tearing down our door and need SSL factories. No, I'm just kidding. All right.
All right.
That's it.
All right. I think we're finally done.
Amazing. Thanks
Congrats.
everyone for sticking through this.
So you've updated the API ref through the meeting, right? So if I just copy and paste all of this in, that will work, right?
Gotta delete
yep.
the end.
I deleted the end.
Oh, you just did.
I don't know if it refreshed for you or not. Yeah.
Yep, he ended at sockets listener factory.
I can just hit a refresh just in case. Just have to scroll like a caveman.
And just to be sure we're doing everything correctly here, there are no unaddressed comments from YouTube chat, right?
In the sense that we can't do anything about them. they're all audio related, so it is what it is.
Right, but nobody has.
Nobody
there are
could hear
no
anything.
comments that would invalidate decisions that we just made.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
So this time I actually add the delimiter at the end, because last time I didn't do that and that was not good for nodes.
I was gonna say GitHub detects that and renders it just fine, but I can believe your notes thing wouldn't.
No, because I concatenate the markdown and then in the middle there's all shit. All right, so then let me just apply the label first. Not that it matters, but it reads nicer. Yeah.
All right. See you, everyone.
Sounds good.
See ya.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Right.
Where's my mouse?